Welcome back to the Elise Surkoff podcast, where we help women in perimenopause and menopause thrive unapologetically from the inside out. All right, this is a really hot topic, and I probably get at least once, if not twice a day, women in my DMs talking about fasting. Should I be fasting? What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? And I'll always say this, which is that it is never as simple as a yes or no answer. The answer will always be it depends. However, the question I like to follow up with, kind of like when I find out a woman is on birth control, is like, hey, why are you on birth control? And we can talk about birth control another time because once again, I digress. But when someone is like, hey, what do you think of fasting? I say, hey, why do you want to fast? And like 9.99999 out of 10 times, a woman will say to me to lose weight because I saw Karen down the street. She lost so much weight fasting, intermittent fasting, doing that 8-hour window of eating and then 16 hours of not eating. And I'm trying to do it. So here are my thoughts on fasting. And the reality is that whatever method is going to keep you in a calorie deficit is going to be successful for weight loss. So if you're like, I decided to cut out, I don't know, potatoes or sugar or carbs or breakfast or my 3 p.m. meal or dinner, then you will lose weight because you're putting yourself in a caloric deficit. And so the reason that fasting is successful for a lot of women is because skipping breakfast is really easy. And so it's a lot, let's say, easier to adhere to skipping breakfast and then starting their day off with lunch and then having a snack and then dinner and then maintaining that calorie deficit by way of not having breakfast. And so then there's no real magic or science behind fasting in terms of weight loss other than it's going to maintain a calorie deficit. Now, for some of us, myself included, this actually made me gain weight because I am someone that has a strong metabolism, a very flexible metabolism, and I'll talk about that in another episode. And so I'm fucking hungry in the morning, and the idea of me skipping breakfast is awful. And so when I moved breakfast, let's say, or I delayed breakfast, then I found that I was eating more and more throughout that window because I had this sense of urgency saying, oh my gosh, I can only eat in the span of 8 hours. So I've got to hurry up and pack it all in. And then I was overeating and negated any calorie deficit. So that shit just did not work for me. And I tried it like multiple times over 2 years when it was like so popular. And I was like, fuck this shit. That's the first thing. The second thing I will say when it comes to intermittent fasting is if you can't do it for a decade, don't even bother doing it for a day. So if you're someone who is like, I can never have breakfast again and I am totally fine, then hats off to you, girl. Go ahead and do it. If it's going to work for you and it's going to keep you in in a healthy body physique and you're comfortable and you're confident, amazing. But what happens is that I see a lot of women come to me, and this is why I do not like intermittent fasting, is they say, I tried intermittent fasting or I do intermittent fasting, but they keep moving the window. So let's say they're eating from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Well, what happens at 11 a.m. in the morning? I don't know about you, but I am butt fuck knee deep in work at 11 a.m. So I'm not going to stop at 11 a.m. to eat. My lunch that I take is from 12 to 1. So I could potentially do 12 to 8, but I'm sleeping at 9. So that's not an option for me. I don't like eating, and I'll talk about that, too close to bedtime. So what will happen is what I see is even women will do like a 10 to 6 time frame, but then something happens when they quote unquote open their window and they're like, I was busy with my kid. I had to take my parents somewhere. I got busy with work. And now that 10 and or 11 o'clock window becomes a 1 and or 2 o'clock. And I honestly, this is what I see practically most of the time. Not many people that I've worked with have had that strong discipline window opening at that time every day. And so they just kind of say, well, it's fine. I'll just open my window later and then I'll just eat less. And that will just kind of like help me lose more weight. And I get it. Yes, because less calories, more weight loss, 100%. So now that 11 or 10 a.m. window has now become 1 and or 2 p.m. and you've skipped not one, but 2 meals. And so metabolically speaking, you're down regulating and now your body is just not hungry anymore in the morning, which which is like problem number 35 that I get every single day when women come to me. They say, I'm just not hungry in the morning. And it's typically because they've done this at some point in the last few years to help them lose weight. And so now that their metabolism is down regulated, it makes it easier to gain weight. So the second that they start eating at 2:00, and they might eat a little meal because it's butt fuck in the middle of the day, then they come home and they are starving, right? Because the metabolism is like, oh, yo, listen, we got to figure this shit out. You got to start eating again. And then lo and behold, they are having, high calorie meals, very palatable meals, and they kind of overshoot their calorie allotment for the day, and now they're overeating. All right, even though when they look back on it, they're like, well, I only started eating at 1 or 2 p.m. And these are the same women that have a significant amount of weight to lose, at least 10, 30, 40, 50 pounds. But then they will say to me, I'm pretty sure I'm not eating enough. And I'll say, why? And they're like, well, I don't eat much in the morning. I'm not hungry. And then I don't have much for lunch because I'm busy. And then I just have dinner. What they're missing are all those little snacks that happen in between or on the weekend or in the evening, because you have this false sense of security that you underate, and therefore you are allowed to make up those calories and have more food. So if you ask me personally what I think or how I feel about intermittent fasting, I do not like it for fat loss or weight loss. I just think it causes more problems. And especially if you're a woman in perimenopause, I really strongly recommend you do not do intermittent fasting. The longer you go without eating and the more times you repeat this cycle, the more stress you are stressing an already stressed system. So your body, because we're losing progesterone, is like, think of it as you're new to this stress, right? Your body's trying to adapt to this level of stress resiliency that's gone. So you're now stress resistant, and now you're adding more stress, and your system is like, what the fuck is happening right now? And it's retaliating, and it's generally speaking going to make you feel more foggy, more tired, less energy, shot libido, and more weight gain. And nobody wants that. Now, if you're a woman in menopause, so meaning progesterone, the change and transition of dropping progesterone, losing estrogen has already happened. I'm a lot more lenient. I don't mind this, especially if it is temporary. So like a 24-hour fast or even shorter windows of fasting I like. Now, if you're in perimenopause, or menopause, I am a big believer, and now I'm going to confuse the fuck out of you, of really having a solid fast overnight. So I like a 12 to 14-hour fast. I really do. And the general quote unquote rule, if I had to make one with our ladies in our community, in our FFWE community, is to not eat 3 hours before you go to bed. So for me, I get up really early in the morning. I'm like a 5 a.m. kind of woman. So I'm in bed around 9, or like I'm sleeping by 9:30. So I like to have an earlier dinner. Okay. I typically will have, in all reality, and if you have kids in sports, then you can attest to this, I'm either eating at stupid early hours or stupid late hours. So I will always have stupid early hours and then a snack later. So it really depends on where my kids need to be. If we're in hockey season, and like, for example, at the time of this recording, it is May 22nd. We have 2 tournaments coming up this weekend. So we're dividing and conquering, Albert and I, and I'm going to be at the arena all day tomorrow, Friday, from like 12 till 8 p.m. All right. We're just going to hang out for the day there. And so I need to make sure that I'm, bringing all my meals because, like the games are at such weird times. I know that, let's say the last game ends at 7:30. Most people go home and they eat dinner and they're good to go. But for me, I'm still going to be going to bed early. And so I will make that plan to either buy dinner, which I likely won't, or just bring something and I'll have it the same time, 5:30 or 6, so that my body has enough time to digest. So why do I like to do this? Is that gives the body enough time to digest so that when you're sleeping, the body doesn't have to do any other work other than healing from the day, recovering, and that cellular turnover happens when digestion stops. Okay. So, and then the other thing I just want to add here, if you're a woman in perimenopause and you're like, but I get hungry at night, you're not going to die. Number one. Number two, make sure you're eating enough carbs at dinner. So the other thing I see is women just like to cut out carbs at dinner, but I'll talk about that another time as well. So let's get back to fasting here. I do like to have that 12 to 14-hour fast. Anything more than that, I personally just find is unnecessary. Now, if you're someone who is like, I really want to lose weight, should I fast? I would say, You don't have to fast to lose weight. So if there's nothing else that you take away from this episode, just understand you don't need to fast to lose weight, just like you don't need to give up carbs for the rest of your life or avoid sugar for the rest of your life. You can learn moderation. And I encourage you to do so because at some point in your life, you're probably going to want to have breakfast. Imagine you're at an all-inclusive resort with your family, with your partner, and they've got this beautiful breakfast. Are you like, nope, I don't eat breakfast. Like, I don't do breakfast. We don't do that. And now I've got to wait till 2 o'clock when the next meal starts. Like, you might have to practice a little bit more flexibility. And the bottom line is you don't need to do that. But at the end of the day, however you maintain your calorie deficit is going to be successful for you. So if you're listening to this and you're like, shut up, Elise, I do really well with intermittent fasting, then go ahead and continue to do it. Because you might be someone who is like, at 10 a.m., I open my window and at 6 p.m., I close it and then I am good to go. It works for me. I'm flexible with this. I do it 9 out of 10 times, 6 out of 7 days of the week, then I don't need to change that. It is working for you. I am talking to the woman who isn't consistent with it, who keeps pushing their window back and then has that metabolic downregulation, which then fucks up your hormones and makes you gain weight faster. All right. I hope that this was helpful for you. If you're interested in like, hey, how can I lose weight on the more, flexible, moderate way? I will go ahead and drop my link to my free macro guide. You can just start following that, set some macros, and tell me how that works for you. Of course, it's going to feel a little bit harder because you got to do a little bit of work and it's a lot more challenging than just saying, I'm just not going to have breakfast or I'm just not going to eat carbs. But again, it's not about how fast we get there. It's about the sustainability of what happens when we actually get there. So I hope this was helpful. I would love if you could just leave me a review. And of course, if you want to watch this on YouTube, I know I've got a bit of a cold today, but I promise there's nothing hanging out of my nose. You can go ahead and catch that as well. Until the next time.